From the earliest days of man's awareness, there has been one persistent question that echoes through every culture, every generation, and every soul brave enough to ask it: how do I live a life of true abundance? Not merely one of material accumulation or fleeting success, but a life marked by peace, purpose, and plenty within and without. Most never find the answer, not because it's hidden, but because it is simple. Too simple for the complex mind that believes struggle must accompany every reward. But I assure you there is a law, a spiritual law that governs abundance, and it is as exact as gravity. It is not man-made, it is not determined by economic conditions or your station in life. It is timeless, irrevocable, and completely fair. And once you understand it, not intellectually but experientially, your life begins to shift, not gradually, not someday, but now. This law is not whispered in the halls of the world's financial institutions, but it has been written on the pages of every sacred text and proven in the lives of the world's most fulfilled individuals. It is the law of circulation, the law that states, what you give in alignment with truth returns to you multiplied, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. The moment you align with this law, your life begins to reflect its rhythm. You begin to understand that money is not a god, it is a tool. And tools are meant to serve, not enslave. You begin to see that wealth is not something to chase, it is something to attract by who you become. And you become abundant, not by grasping, hoarding, or fearing lack, but by stepping into the flow of giving, receiving, and trusting the divine process. You cannot outgive the universe. The moment you give in faith, from principle, from a place of overflow rather than obligation, you have declared your citizenship in a higher economy. One not subject to inflation, recession, or the opinion of man. The universe, or if you prefer, divine intelligence, does not operate in random blessings. It operates in laws. Just as surely as fire warms and water cools, the law of abundance responds to your inner state, not your outer effort alone, but your intention, your vibration, your trust, and your willingness to move first. Let me ask you this: when was the last time you gave without flinching, without expecting, without calculating what would come back? Because therein lies the truth. Most people wait to receive before they give. They want proof before they act. But the law of divine abundance does not reward hesitation. It rewards alignment. Those who understand this law do not live from scarcity, even when appearances suggest otherwise. They live from principle, and principle is stronger than panic. They give their time, their attention, their energy, their resources, not recklessly but intentionally. They understand that giving is not loss, it is planting, and every seed planted with faith, care, and consistency returns in season. Maybe not from the same person, the same source, or the same direction, but it returns, always, because that is the nature of divine law. It never forgets a seed. Now, let's define abundance properly. Abundance is not just money. It is not just more things. It is not just outer gain. Abundance is wholeness. It is having enough of what matters most: clarity, peace, time, energy, purpose, love, connection, and yes, resources. But it begins within, and it flows outward. You do not chase abundance. You become a match for it. How? By living in integrity with its laws. That means speaking truth, thinking generously, acting responsibly, trusting consistently, and most of all, giving faithfully. You do not need to give everything, but you must give something. Something that costs you comfort, something that stretches your identity, something that activates your faith. The universe is not moved by your need, it is moved by your seed, and what you plant with belief and consistency will become a harvest. The problem is not that this law doesn't work. The problem is most people do not work the law. They dabble, they hesitate, they try. But divine law responds not to trying, it responds to knowing. There is a story I once heard about a man who wanted wealth but feared giving. He held on to his money with clenched fists, always worried he'd lose it, always afraid of being without. And the more he grasped, the less he had. Not because someone took it, but because his fear became his vibration, and fear always attracts limitation. Finally, he met a mentor who said, "What you hold dies, what you circulate multiplies." That day the man gave not everything but something meaningful. And not just money, he gave encouragement. He gave time, he gave service. And what followed was not magic but multiplication. Why? Because he stepped into the rhythm of divine abundance. He moved from fear to flow, and flow always attracts more, like a river that gives its waters to the ocean without ever running dry. That's how abundance works. Not in dammed up storage, but in active circulation. Now you might ask, how do I know if I'm aligned with this law? The answer is in your feeling. Are you anxious when you give? Are you resentful when others succeed? Are you hesitant to share your gifts because you fear they'll be ignored? Then the answer is simple. You are not yet in the law. But you can be. Right now, today, by shifting from scarcity to trust, from getting to giving, from protecting to participating. Divine abundance is not for the elite. It is not reserved for the few. It is available to every man, woman, and child who dares to step into its rhythm. But it does not respond to begging. It responds to belief. And belief is not a feeling. It is a decision, a stance, a standard, a lifestyle. And when you live by that standard, everything changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. Let me offer this to you as clearly as I can. You are already in possession of the seed. It may not feel like much, it may seem small, but the seed you have is enough to begin, enough to break the cycle, enough to prove to yourself and to life itself that you are ready to step into something greater. Whether it's a kind word, an hour of focused work, a dollar given in faith, or a commitment to speak abundance over your life each morning. Start there. That is how the shift begins. That is how alignment begins. That is how momentum builds. Because divine abundance, though infinite in supply, respects stewardship. And when you steward the little with love, the much will come, not as a bribe, not as a reward, but as a response. Because that is how law works, predictably, powerfully, perfectly. There is a moment in every life where the truth becomes undeniable, not as information but as realization. And the realization is this: I am not separate from abundance. I am the channel through which it flows. This is not a poetic sentiment. It is a law, and once it becomes your dominant understanding, your entire experience of life begins to evolve. You begin to see lack not as a permanent condition, but as a temporary misalignment. You stop asking, why don't I have more, and begin asking, where have I blocked the flow? That single shift in perspective transforms victims into creators, wanderers into builders. Because you begin to recognize the truth, you are not waiting for abundance to find you. It is waiting for you to become available. And availability in the divine economy has nothing to do with credentials, titles, or appearances. It has everything to do with willingness. Willingness to trust, willingness to give, willingness to act in faith, especially when circumstances suggest otherwise. You see, divine abundance is not accessed through emotion. It is accessed through alignment. You don't have to feel rich to be abundant. You don't have to feel certain to act in faith. Emotion is a response, not a requirement. What matters is what you do when nothing outside of you supports the decision. What matters is whether you honor the law in the silence, in the shadows, when no one is clapping and no one is watching. That is when the law begins to open. That is when your spirit begins to stretch, because in those moments your subconscious is being rewired. Not through force, but through consistency. You are training it to associate giving with strength, trusting with wisdom, and service with power. And the subconscious, once retrained, will move mountains to create what you believe. Not because it's mystical, but because belief shapes perception, and perception determines what you allow, expect, and pursue. Let me illustrate this further. Picture a man standing in front of a vast field. In his hand is a single seed. He looks at the field and says, "I'll plant the seed when the harvest comes." But nature doesn't respond to demand. It responds to process. No seed, no harvest. And yet this is how most people approach life. They say, "I'll give when I have more. I'll act when I'm ready. I'll step forward when I see results." But the law does not bend to waiting. It activates through initiation. And initiation begins with you. Not later, not someday. Now, the moment you plant the seed, by giving, by serving, by trusting, the universe begins its work. And it does not sleep. It does not forget. It multiplies what is planted with faith. Your job is not to chase the outcome. Your job is to become consistent with the process. Because divine law honors the sower, not the skeptic, the giver, not the doubter, the one who plants without flinching, because they understand the harvest is guaranteed. Now let's address the misconception that giving is always financial. Giving, in its truest form, is energetic. You give your focus, your presence, your best effort, your gratitude, your encouragement, your attention, your faith. And every act of giving, no matter how small, echoes back to you. This is not sentiment, it is system. And if you observe the most abundant individuals, not just wealthy, but fulfilled, you'll find they are always in service. Not to earn favor, but because they understand flow. They don't hoard ideas, they share them. They don't protect love, They express it. They don't wait for a return. They become the return. And because of that, they live in overflow. Not because they're lucky, but because they live in alignment with the law. And the law, when honored, turns ordinary days into extraordinary dividends. You might say, but Earl, what if I give and don't receive? My answer is simple. You always receive. It may not come through the channel you expect, but it always returns. That is law. What often happens is we give and then we watch. We wait, we analyze, we dig up the seed to see if it's growing. And in doing so, we interrupt the process. We tell life, I don't trust you. But the one who understands divine abundance plants and walks away not in neglect but in trust. They know that just because they can't see the harvest doesn't mean it's not forming. Faith is not watching, it's working. And while you're working, refining your skills, uplifting others, acting with discipline, life is rearranging circumstances in your favor. The doors may open suddenly, but the preparation happened in the silence. That's how divine abundance moves, quietly at first, then all at once. Now let me give you something tangible. If you want to activate this law starting today, choose one area of your life where you've been withholding. Maybe it's your attention in relationships. Maybe it's your time at work. Maybe it's your willingness to forgive. Whatever it is, give there. Not because you feel like it, but because you choose alignment over emotion. Then observe not obsessively, but curiously, how things begin to shift. You'll notice new conversations, new ideas, new inner strength. That's not coincidence, that's feedback from the law. It's showing you that circulation is in motion. That energy, once released with faith, creates space for more. And what fills that space is always more refined, more aligned, more empowering than what you released. That is divine abundance, not a random reward, but a precise response. The secret is never in waiting for more, it's in becoming more. Because as you become more generous, more focused, more faithful, your capacity increases. And the law responds not to what you want, but to what you can handle. That's why many people pray for blessings they are not structured to sustain, and when they don't receive them, they assume the law failed, but the law never fails. It protects. It withholds not to punish, but to prepare. And the moment you become the kind of person who can sustain greater abundance, the abundance will meet you, not a moment too soon, not a second too late, but exactly on time, because divine abundance operates in rhythm, and rhythm requires readiness. So don't focus on the gift, focus on becoming the vessel. So now the question is not, when will my abundance come? The question is, what must I become to receive it? That question activates transformation. And transformation always precedes elevation. You don't get the abundance you want, you get the abundance you match. And matching is not about pretending, it's about preparing. It's about cleaning your internal space, clarifying your motives, committing to truth, and aligning your actions with what you say you value. That's when the shift happens. That's when you stop chasing and start attracting. Because divine abundance is not found in the struggle. It is found in the surrender to the law, the surrender to the rhythm, the surrender to the truth that you are not waiting for a blessing. You are becoming the blessing. One of the most liberating truths you will ever accept is that divine abundance does not come from people. It comes through people. That means no single person holds your future. No boss, no client, no investor, no family member, no friend has the final say in your life's prosperity. They are channels, not sources, and when you understand this, you stop fearing rejection. You stop obsessing over closed doors. You stop trying to force outcomes that no longer serve you. Because you realize that your abundance is not dependent on the moods, decisions, or limitations of others. It is governed by law. And when you live in alignment with that law, new channels always appear. New people, new ideas, new opportunities begin to surface, sometimes from places you never expected. But they come, not because you begged, but because you believed. Not because you chased, but because you prepared. The law honors those who detach from dependency and commit to alignment. Always. Detachment, you see, is a key that few understand. Most people block abundance not by what they do, but by how tightly they try to control it. They hold their goals with clenched fists. They obsess over timelines. They demand that blessings arrive in a specific shape, on a specific day, through a specific person. And when it doesn't go that way, they assume the law is broken. But the law is never broken, it's just not obligated to your expectations. Divine abundance flows where there is trust, not tension. It flows into open hands, not closed ones. And so the one who is truly aligned says, I trust the law. I will do my part, plant my seed, water it with action, guard it with gratitude, and release the result. That posture opens the gates. That posture removes friction. That posture says to the universe, I'm ready for whatever you have for me. I don't need to control how it arrives because I'm certain that it will. There is a rhythm to life that becomes clear once you embrace this principle. You reap in a different season than you sow. That is not failure. That is the cycle. Farmers know this. They plant in spring, they water in summer, they harvest in fall, and during the winter they wait, not anxiously but confidently, because they know the seed is working even when they can't see it. But most people don't live like this. They want to plant and harvest in the same week, and when they don't see immediate results, they quit. Or worse, they dig up the seed and start over. That is not alignment. That is spiritual impatience. The individual meant to unlock divine abundance understands that timing is sacred, delay is not denial. Every seed you've planted in faith is either growing underground or being multiplied in ways you cannot yet perceive. Your job is not to force it to sprout, your job is to remain faithful while it does. Let's go even deeper. Divine abundance does not respond to entitlement, it responds to stewardship. That means your current level of increase is not a measure of your worth, it's a measure of what you've proven you can manage. That's not a judgment, that's an invitation to upgrade your systems, to manage your time, your thoughts, your finances, your relationships with greater integrity, to treat what you have with the same respect you would give to what you want, because when you treat the little things as sacred, the big things arrive, not as a reward, but as a response. The law says if you are faithful with a little, you will be trusted with more, and that faithfulness is not just about money, it's about attention, energy, words, influence. When you become excellent at managing what's already in your hands begin to overflow. Write this down. Divine abundance is activated through honor. Honor for yourself, honor for others, honor for the process. When you dishonor time, you lose momentum. When you dishonor people, you lose connection. When you dishonor the law, you lose access. But when you treat every moment, every interaction, every resource with reverence, you become a magnet. Because the law of abundance doesn't just respond to action, it responds to attitude. It reads your posture, your heart, your intention. You cannot fake it, you cannot manipulate it. You either live in honor or you don't. And the person who does, they rise, not because they are perfect, but because they are aligned. They do not sabotage what's sacred. They don't curse what they claim to want. They bless it. They protect it. They build it. Now let's speak about gratitude, not as a reaction, but as a strategy. Gratitude is not what you feel after something good happens. Gratitude is what you practice to cause something good to happen. It's not emotional, it's vibrational. It tunes your mind to see opportunities where others see obstacles. It shifts your focus from lack to leverage. It tells the law, I'm ready for more and I will receive it without complaint. When you begin each day with gratitude before the breakthrough, before the evidence, you are no longer living in reaction. You are living in authority. Because you are choosing to speak the language of abundance regardless of current conditions. That is power. That is faith in action. And faith expressed through gratitude is one of the fastest ways to collapse the distance between where you are and where you are destined to be. And what about fear? The individual meant for divine abundance doesn't pretend fear doesn't exist. They simply refuse to be ruled by it. They understand that fear is a messenger, not a master. It signals where trust is needed. It reveals where belief must be upgraded. It invites you to step anyway, move anyway, give anyway. Because courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to act in alignment despite it. Every breakthrough is preceded by fear, and every time you move forward anyway, the law takes notice. It says this one is serious, and life begins to cooperate in ways that defy logic. Doors open, ideas emerge, resources flow, not because fear disappeared, but because faith became louder. So let me remind you of something you may have forgotten. You are not waiting for permission. You are not behind. You are not missing anything. The law of divine abundance has not abandoned you. It is waiting for you to align. And alignment is not a mystery. It is a practice. It begins with clarity, flows through gratitude, is protected by honor, and is multiplied by stewardship. This is the rhythm. This is the path. And this is your moment to step fully into it. Not someday, not when you feel ready, not when everything is perfect, but now, because now is the only moment the law ever responds to. It does not live in the past. It does not operate in someday. It is always present, and if you are willing to be present with it, fully, sincerely, consistently, it will begin to pour into your life what you once thought could only happen for others. You'll see it, you'll feel it, you'll live it, because you were never separate from abundance. You simply had to remember how to receive it. There comes a moment in the life of every person seeking abundance where they must face one question with brutal honesty. Do I truly believe I am worthy of receiving it? Not intellectually, not casually, but deep within, in the private chambers of the soul. Because here lies a truth that no principle, no system, and no strategy can override. Your life will never rise above the level of your self-worth. You may hope for more, work for more, even pray for more, but if your internal thermostat is set to limitation, you will subconsciously reject the very thing you desire. Divine abundance is not just about outer alignment. It is about inner permission. You must allow yourself to receive. And that allowance is not a wish. It is a standard. The person who walks in divine abundance does so not because they are more talented or more fortunate, but because they have aligned their inner world to the truth. I am enough. I am ready. I am safe to receive. Worthiness, you see, is not something you earn. It is something you accept. You are worthy because you exist, because you were created with intention, with purpose, with divine signature. The oak tree does not ask the forest if it's allowed to grow tall. The sun does not request permission to rise. Likewise, you must stop seeking external approval for internal value. When you finally decide that your worth is not up for debate, the world begins to respond differently. You'll walk into rooms and things will shift. Not because you said more, but because you radiated alignment. You'll notice people treat you with more respect, not because they changed, but because you did. You see, when you respect yourself, when you honor yourself, when you see yourself as a vessel for divine increase, life mirrors that back to you. Not by chance, not by force, but by law. Let me ask you this. How would your life look if you stopped apologizing for your desires? If you stopped shrinking your vision to make others comfortable? If you stopped editing your light so you wouldn't outshine mediocrity? That's the level of boldness required to unlock the next dimension of abundance. You must be unapologetic, not arrogant, but unshakable, not demanding, but deserving. Because what you believe you deserve, you begin to prepare for. And what you prepare for, you begin to attract. This is not self-help jargon. This is spiritual mechanics. Your thoughts are prayers. Your emotions are magnets. Your beliefs are blueprints. And the universe, in all its precision, does not deliver based on what you want. It delivers based on what you prepare for. So here is a principle to write down and remember. Abundance flows to structure. It is not enough to want more. You must create the container for it. That means putting systems in place. Habits, boundaries, environments that match your next level. You cannot expect the flood of divine blessing to pour into your life if you are still operating with the structure of survival. Expansion requires preparation. If you want greater wealth, do you have the financial discipline to manage it? If you want greater influence, do you have the emotional maturity to steward it? If you want deeper love, do you have the self-awareness to receive it without sabotaging it? These are not punishments. These are invitations. Invitations to grow into the person who can hold what they once feared they'd drop. Because divine abundance never sends blessings that would destroy you. It sends them when you're ready. Let's now address one of the most powerful tools of all, expectation. The person aligned with divine law expects good, not in arrogance, but in trust, not as entitlement, but as alignment. They wake up each morning not asking, will something go wrong, but saying, I wonder how the universe will surprise me today. That shift in energy, subtle as it may seem, alters your entire posture. It softens your nervous system. It opens your awareness. It tunes your internal frequency to one of receiving, because what you expect you tend to find. The pessimist and the optimist live in the same world, but they don't see the same opportunities. Not because life favors one over the other, but because one is looking for problems while the other is looking for provision. Divine abundance meets those who expect it, not with passivity, but with joyful responsibility. And now we come to an even deeper layer, forgiveness. You cannot walk fully in divine abundance while carrying the weight of resentment, not against others, not against yourself. Resentment is a dam. It blocks the flow. It tells the law, I'm still holding on to what hurt me, so I can't hold what will heal me. Forgiveness is not a gift to your past. It's a door to your future. And until you walk through that door, you're locked in a story that no longer serves you. The most abundant people I've ever known are not the ones who had the least pain. They are the ones who released it, who said that chapter is over, I bless it, I've learned from it, but I won't relive it. That level of freedom opens up energetic space, and that space is exactly where new abundance is deposited. So if you want to receive more, ask yourself, what pain am I still rehearsing? Then make the decision, not when it feels right, but when you're ready to be free. Let's talk now about identity. Divine abundance is never separate from who you believe yourself to be. And so the question becomes, what kind of person am I becoming? Every day, through repetition, through decision, through thought, you are building a self-image. And that image either invites abundance or resists it. You cannot see yourself as broken, unworthy, or forgotten and expect life to treat you as whole, powerful, and chosen. That's not how the law works. The image must come first. The identity must be installed before the upgrade can arrive. This is why the most powerful declaration you can make is not "I will be," it is "I am." I am disciplined, I am prosperous, I am divinely supported, not someday, now. And when you repeat this identity mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you begin to act from it, speak from it, live from it. And when your behavior catches up to your belief, the law of divine abundance begins to move mountains in your favor. So what now? You've heard the truth, you've remembered the law, you've felt the tug of something greater. This is the point of decision. Will you return to the smallness of familiar stories, or will you rise into the vastness of divine partnership? The law of abundance is not reserved for a chosen few. It is available to anyone bold enough to believe, wise enough to prepare, and humble enough to receive. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for what already has your name on it. The question is not whether the law will work. The question is whether you will. And if you do, if you commit, align, forgive, structure, expect, and embody, then abundance, real and lasting, will not just touch your life. It will transform it. When we speak of divine abundance, we are not just referring to wealth in the material sense. We are speaking of a life so deeply rooted in purpose, so fully synchronized with higher law, that prosperity becomes the byproduct of who you are, not something you chase, not something you hope for, but something that naturally unfolds because you are in harmony with the laws that govern increase. There is a moment when this realization clicks into place, when you stop trying to get and begin to be, when you stop grasping at life and begin generating from within. In that shift, everything changes because you begin to live from supply, not from lack, from sufficiency, not scarcity, from alignment, not effort alone. And it is in that internal repositioning that divine abundance begins to overtake you, not with chaos, but with grace. Not as a random event, but as a natural consequence of who you've chosen to become. Now let's speak of vibration, not in abstract, but in precision. You do not get what you want in this life. You get what you are in vibrational alignment with. This is not philosophy, this is frequency. Every thought, every emotion, every belief you consistently hold emits a signal, and that signal is magnetic. If your dominant signal is worry, fear, or complaint, then even when opportunity knocks, you won't recognize it, you'll dismiss it, you'll sabotage it, because your internal frequency is tuned to something different. But when your dominant signal is trust, gratitude, certainty, and expectation, you draw in the equivalent, you resonate with it, you harmonize with it, you allow it. That's why it's not enough to visualize once and wait. You must live as though what you want is already yours. Not just think it, but walk it, speak it, serve from it. Because when your behavior matches the blessing begins to unfold in real time. Think about it. How would you carry yourself if you knew divine abundance was already en route? How would you walk into rooms? How would you handle problems? How would you treat people? You'd move differently, not arrogantly, but calmly, not desperately, but deliberately. That is the posture that unlocks the law. Not panic, but poise. Not craving, but conviction. You don't beg the universe. You don't plead with God. You partner with the principle. You align with truth. And the truth is this: abundance is not earned through striving. It is received through alignment. Alignment in thought, alignment in emotion, alignment in action. The greatest breakthroughs are often hidden behind the smallest shifts. A shift in how you wake up, a shift in how you speak to yourself, a shift in how you treat others. And those shifts done repeatedly recalibrate your entire field of experience. Let me give you something practical. Guard your inputs. The person meant to walk in divine abundance becomes fiercely protective over what enters their mind. Why? Because they understand that their mind is the control center of their reality. You cannot watch chaos, listen to fear, dwell on complaint, and expect to live in peace and overflow. That's not alignment. That's contradiction. Every time you consume something, you are agreeing to let it shape you. So ask yourself, what voices have you given authority to? What messages are you allowing to occupy the fertile ground of your mind? The aligned individual curates their inputs with the same discipline a farmer uses to protect a field. They do not allow weeds to take root. They do not allow confusion to gain a foothold. They saturate their mind with truth, with principle, with wisdom, And because of that, their life begins to reflect clarity. Write this down. Your mental diet determines your spiritual shape. If you feed on scarcity, you will shrink your capacity to receive. If you feed on confusion, you will block your own direction. But if you feed on truth, if you meditate on divine law, on identity, on gratitude, on purpose, you begin to expand. That expansion is not visible at first, but it is powerful. It begins to show up in how you speak, how you respond, how you choose. Your tolerance for mediocrity diminishes. Your boundaries strengthen, your clarity sharpens, and from that new internal architecture, you begin to house greater blessing. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're becoming the kind of person the law is designed to serve. Divine abundance does not reward noise, it rewards order. It does not respond to manipulation, it responds to internal mastery. Let's touch on joy. Joy is one of the highest frequencies of all, and it is magnetic to divine increase. But joy is not happiness. Happiness is based on conditions. Joy is a state of being. It is a decision, a spiritual discipline, a choice to remain in gratitude and expectancy even when outer circumstances suggest otherwise. The abundant individual cultivates joy, not by pretending life is perfect, but by anchoring in the truth that life is unfolding with perfection, that behind every delay, every detour, every challenge, there is refinement, there is preparation, there is wisdom being built. When you live with that awareness, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and you start declaring, "This is working for me." That shift in language, that shift in posture, keeps your frequency aligned, your heart open, and your path clear. Let me speak to responsibility. Divine abundance is not random, it is strategic. It seeks containers that are prepared to carry it with reverence. This is why it's not enough to pray for more. You must become more. You must become more disciplined, more focused, more grateful, more precise. Responsibility is not a burden, it is a privilege. It is the invitation to hold more light, more wisdom, more influence. And when you begin to treat your current life like sacred ground, when you clean your space, honor your word, manage your time, and uplift others, you signal to life that you are ready, not hoping, ready. The law responds not to longing, but to readiness, and readiness is built through daily action, consistent intention, and unwavering alignment with principle. So wherever you are right now, pause, breathe. Realize that everything you've ever needed is already within you. The seeds of abundance are already planted. The law is already in motion. The only missing piece is your conscious agreement, your decision to live like it's true, to act like it's real, to embody the future now. That doesn't mean you have every answer. It means you've decided to become the kind of person who will find them. It means you've released the identity of the struggler and stepped into the identity of the steward. It means you've chosen to believe not just once, but every day, every hour, with every choice. That is the path. That is the frequency. And that is the posture that unlocks divine abundance, not as a concept, but as a lifestyle. The most misunderstood aspect of divine abundance is that it doesn't just arrive, it responds. It doesn't just appear in your life because you want it. It is magnetized by who you become, how you think, how you carry yourself, and what you allow. And once you understand that abundance is not about wishing, but about energetic congruence, you start to see that everything in your life is either a permission or a denial. Every time you delay the thing you know you're supposed to do, you deny the abundance already prepared for you. Every time you lower your standard to fit into a crowd, you give away a measure of your authority. Every time you speak words of lack, even casually, you give energy to the very conditions you claim to want to leave behind. But the person who is meant for divine abundance begins to move differently. They realize that life is listening, that their environment is responding, that their words are seeds and their habits are the soil, and that realization births something powerful. Responsibility, not as weight, but as the first sign of awakening. Responsibility in the realm of abundance looks like this. If it's in my life, I either invited it, tolerated it, or allowed it. And if I created it, I can change it. That is power. That is spiritual maturity. Because you no longer wait for life to give you something, you become the source of it. You generate it. You bring energy to the room. You bring clarity to the confusion. You bring focus to the chaos. And suddenly the very life you used to admire in others starts to mirror back through your own actions. Not because you became louder or more aggressive, but because you became aligned. The world may not understand it at first, but abundance understands alignment. And alignment never hides, it radiates. It speaks through your tone, your eyes, your posture, and your presence. You don't have to announce you're blessed. And here is something many miss. Divine abundance is not meant to stay in you, it is meant to flow through you. You are not just a receiver of provision, you are a vessel of multiplication. You don't just get blessed to enjoy it, you get blessed to circulate it. The person who truly lives in divine abundance stops thinking, how can I get more? And starts asking, how can I release more, serve more, multiply more? Because they understand everything you keep with fear, you lose, but everything you release with trust, you multiply. This is not generosity as a virtue, this is circulation as a principle. The sea that only receives becomes stagnant. The one that receives and gives becomes alive. So ask yourself, where have I dammed the flow? Where have I withheld what I was meant to release? Because it is in the release that the next level of provision is unlocked, not by pleading but by participating. Now we must address identity again, because your results always match your deepest self-concept. If you believe abundance is rare, you will experience scarcity, even in a field of opportunity. If you believe wealth is for others, you will unconsciously avoid it. If you believe struggle makes you more virtuous, you will resist ease. But the person aligned with divine law has rewritten their story. They have said to themselves, I am allowed to thrive. I am allowed to be paid well for my gifts. I am allowed to live in overflow, not because I am better, but because I am aligned. And from that story, a new behavior is born. That person no longer self-sabotages. They no longer apologize for excellence. They no longer explain away their breakthroughs. They receive with grace, they rise with humility, and they elevate others as they go, because their identity is no longer rooted in guilt or shame, it is anchored in truth. Let me offer you a question that can radically shift your life. If I already had everything I desire, how would I behave today? That question is not fantasy. It is the blueprint for alignment. If you had the business, the peace, the clarity, the wealth, the relationship, how would you wake up? How would you respond to inconvenience? How would you walk through your day? Begin there. Begin to show up as that person now. Not when conditions change, but before. Because the law does not respond to delay. It responds to embodiment. Most people wait for life to change so they can change. But those who walk in divine abundance change so that life aligns. They move first. They act from the future. And because of that, they begin to notice something miraculous. The world starts moving around them. Because they are no longer reacting to life, they are designing it. Here's another sacred principle: do not violate your peace to chase abundance. Peace is not the result of abundance, it is the atmosphere in which abundance grows. If you sacrifice your rest, your clarity, your values in the name of success, you are not building prosperity. You are building pressure, and pressure without purpose crushes. But when peace is your foundation, everything else you build becomes sustainable. The aligned individual protects their peace the way a builder protects the foundation of a house. They say no to what distracts. They say yes to what centers. They guard their mornings. They honor their evenings. They protect the flow of their day with spiritual discipline. Because they know that peace is not passivity, it is power. And it is within that power that the most profound breakthroughs are born. Let's return to action. Action is the doorway through which invisible belief becomes visible manifestation. You can pray, journal, visualize, and affirm, but if you do not move, the energy remains trapped in potential. But action aligned with principle, that's where the fire is, that's where the miracle begins to materialize. You don't need to take massive, overwhelming leaps. You need to take clear, consistent steps, daily steps, sacred steps, the kind that may seem small on the surface, but ripple out into eternity, the kind that say to the universe, I'm not just interested, I'm invested. And the moment you move with that energy, things start moving for you. Doors open, favor finds you, not because you're lucky, but because you're finally visible to the system you've been hiding from. So here is the call. Be visible. Not in noise, but in energy. Not in performance, but in presence. You don't need to shout to be seen. You need to show up as the version of you that no longer shrinks, that no longer needs validation, that no longer fears overflow. Step into that today. Speak from that today. Live from that today, and the law of divine abundance, which has been waiting for your agreement, will begin to reveal itself, not in vague possibilities, but in concrete provision. This is not theory, this is law, and the law responds not to the one who merely listens, but to the one who dares to act. The culmination of divine abundance is not just in the receiving, it is in the becoming. It is not what you get, but who you are by the time it arrives. This is the highest revelation of the law. Abundance is not the destination, it is the evidence of transformation. It is what shows up when you are no longer trying to force, impress, or prove. It is what naturally follows the man or woman who has surrendered to alignment, mastered self-concept, walked in peace, acted in clarity, and stewarded every season with responsibility and grace. You'll know you're in this state not by the number in your account, but by the stillness in your soul. You'll wake up without anxiety. You'll walk through your day without tension. You'll make decisions without fear. And those decisions, steady, principled, congruent, will begin to attract the kind of provision that does not rush in and vanish, but abides and multiplies. That is divine abundance. Not a spike, not a miracle, but a new normal grounded in law. Let's be honest, many people want the fruit but reject the pruning. They want the overflow without the refinement. But in the realm of divine law, pruning is not punishment, it is preparation. When a tree grows too wild, its branches begin to drain more than they produce. So the gardener steps in, not with judgment but with vision. He prunes what no longer serves. He cuts back the excess. He disciplines the growth, not to diminish but to increase. And so it is with you. There will be seasons where relationships are removed, habits stripped away, opportunities closed. And the immature mind will call it loss. But the wise spirit will recognize it. This is pruning, this is alignment, this is the law at work, not taking, but making space. And when the space is clear, the blessing expands, not chaotically, but strategically. Because what was once crowded with noise has now become a sanctuary of order, and abundance flows into order like water into shape. One of the greatest markers of someone walking in divine abundance is their posture in silence, when nothing seems to be happening, when results are slow, when prayers haven't been answered in the way they expected. Do they panic? Do they regress? Do they reach back for old habits to soothe the discomfort of delay? Or do they remain steady, knowing that the law works in silence long before it shouts in evidence? That's the test. Can you stand still when the crowd has moved on? Can you keep speaking life when the outcome hasn't arrived? Can you keep showing up as if the breakthrough is guaranteed, not because of emotion, but because of principle? Because here's the truth. What you do in the silence determines what you receive in the spotlight. And the person aligned with divine law doesn't wait for applause to be excellent. They are excellent in secret, in silence, in solitude. And that excellence is what begins to call their harvest forth, even when no one else sees it coming. Now let's speak of legacy. Divine abundance is never selfish. It does not terminate in your hands. It passes through you and into others. It builds systems, uplifts communities, blesses generations. The individual aligned with divine abundance begins to think beyond survival, beyond personal gain and into impact. How will my alignment today shape the future of my children, my community, the lives of people I may never meet? These are the thoughts of someone who understands wealth not as accumulation, but as assignment. That every dollar, every insight, every opportunity is not just for comfort, it's for contribution. And in that contribution, the abundance multiplies. Because the law responds not just to receivers, but to builders, builders of vision, builders of homes, builders of legacy. And the ones who receive the most, they are always the ones who have made themselves vessels of service, not just storage. Write this down. Overflow is not for you alone. Overflow is for the mission. The reason many never walk in sustained abundance is because they stop at me. But when your vision expands to include others, heaven responds, the law responds. Resources begin to appear, not just for you to enjoy, but for you to deploy. And you will know you've reached this place when your first instinct is no longer what can I get, but what can I give? Who can I empower? Who can I mentor? What can I build that lives beyond my name? That is when your capacity increases. That is when more is added to you, not to inflate ego, but to fulfill purpose. Because the more trusted you are with stewardship, the more the law can place into your care. Not out of favoritism, but out of precision. Now pause and reflect. How would your life change if you started treating your abundance not as an achievement, but as an assignment? If you saw your home, your gifts, your insight, your time as sacred currency, given to you not just for your enjoyment, but for transformation, that shift changes everything. You stop asking when will it come and start asking how can I serve what I already have? And the moment you do, your world opens, not with noise but with clarity, not with hustle but with confirmation, not with fear but with the gentle unfolding of doors, people, moments and insight, all arriving to meet the version of you who is finally ready. Not striving, just ready, not waiting, just aligned. So here is the quiet truth that few speak aloud. Divine abundance doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't need permission. It only requires one thing: partnership. Your partnership. And that partnership begins not when everything is perfect, but when your decision is firm, when your behavior aligns with your belief, when your walk matches your word. That is the evidence the law looks for. That is the signal that says this one is ready. And once that signal is steady, once it is no longer mixed with fear, contradiction, or passivity, the law begins to move, slowly at first, then unmistakably, then undeniably, until your life becomes the reflection of every truth you've heard, every seed you've planted, every identity you've chosen, not in theory, but in reality.